Hello, everyone. My name is Lee Guzman Razalon Jr., which you can call me Mingei for short. I'm a co-owner of a group called the Kinchas. If you haven't heard of them, you can Google them. I also represent the world's #1 B-girl, great dancer. Her name is Logan Logistics Edra, who is also from here in San Diego, actually. She lives in Miami right now. And yeah, I do consulting work for Red Bull Dance and Nike Dance, which are platforms that they've had. Nike a little bit more newer. And this is the very first Nike Dance performance shoe that just launched last year that we did consulting on. It's called the Air Sesh. Like sound. That's a native. Just
Awesome. Everyone here is super impressive. The theme of this event is inspiration. What inspires you? What inspires the world? What inspires your design practice? Inspiration can mean a lot of different things. It's a big topic. This is not touching. I'm tempted to shout. I'm going to start with you, Hillary. And ask you, what brands do you think are doing it right? Where are you seeing your inspiration today in the world?
That's a good question. Putting me on the spot. For me, the brands that are doing it right now, what I'm really into, and maybe that's because I'm in it, creating a brand like from soup to nuts of finding cans and dealing with supply chain and all that stuff. The brands to me that are really doing it right are the ones that are being very transparent about all of that. I think of a brand like Everlane that's just very transparent about the cost of making their goods and how much their markup is and how much it takes to get it to you. I think there's a lot to be said about that. And I also, from a standpoint of transparency around sustainability, where are these materials coming from? Where are you sourcing them? Are they using good human rights practices in the creation of them? Are they eco-friendly materials? That sort of thing. I think any of these types of brands that are kind of peeling the lid back on how the products are made are doing something really right. It's a really brave thing to do because you have to be accountable for all that stuff. You're going to put it out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm looking to them for inspiration as well. That makes me think of Patagonia. They had a big announcement last week. At Nugging, that gave away its company to sustainability and decided they didn't want to be a billionaire anymore. So that's a high bar for responsibility. It's not just sustainable practices on the back end, but then like the future where you're headed. I think with Taylor Guitar is an example. It's a really sustainably run business. I'd love to hear, when that news broke, was the office like, we didn't have a meeting. Honestly, did he come in and say, I'm going to give my company away, guys?
I don't know if you know this, but the original founders of our company just sold 2 years ago, their company to the employees. So we're now Nissan, which is employee-owned. Makes us employee-owned. So now I'm the owner of Taylor Guitar. This is working out really well for me. So now, back to Patagonia. Yeah, we first of all, I think that was really amazing. David and I were talking. Patagonia is really what you do. I think your notion about companies being transparent. They've done a really excellent job with that too. And I always kind of have the existential crisis, like how many marketers or how many brands are just doing it, or just saying that they're doing this from a marketing standpoint. And I think that's easy for a lot of companies to go out there and just buy kind of badges to put on their website. But I think with the companies that are being really transparent about it, that really kind of live up to it. I mean, that's who I seek and look for inspiration. Patagonia has been around forever, and I think I've mentioned it a few times. My spirit animal to Danielle. Just such an interesting character. And at Taylor, we make a product out of wood, so we naturally have kind of this notion of forestry and sustainability and preserving forests. Kind of baked into everything we do. So there are a lot of things that we do. Here's the advertising for Taylor Guitars. There it comes. So a lot of the things that we do, we really this started with our founders too. They spend a lot of time going, okay, well, if I have a block of wood, how many pieces of how many necks can I get out of this block of wood? And we really did a lot of things to really reinvent how lumber was milled. And so we maximized it's called maximizing yield, maximizing the yield that we get out of a piece of wood at very little waste. The waste we do have, we turn it into cutting boards. It's all orphan wood. Can't use it for musical instruments. So we turn it into cutting boards. Actually started with another company that is another way to turn that wood around. We have reforestation efforts with land we own in Hawaii, and we have a mill in Cameroon because sourcing ebony out of Cameroon in Africa is the whole thing. And the only way to do it is to have a business there. So that company, this is way before I got there, only 2 years ago, has always had an eye towards sustainability. So when you see, and we actually, we don't really talk about it that much. If you get our magazine, you would know these things, but you don't see it from advertising. And this is probably the most anybody's ever talked about it in front of a group of like, I don't know, 8 people here. So I apologize for like making this an ad, but we don't really talk about it because we kind of want people to know about it naturally. We kind of feel like, well, it's us doing our part. So we always have an eye toward what Patty is doing. And even though I say that, like, well, I feel like sometimes brands are just the whole ESG thing. They're just putting badges on the website to be good marketers. Like the other part of me goes, well, at least they're kind of trying, So maybe that's not inspiring, but at least they're thinking about it in some way. Hopefully that transpire into something larger for them.
Yeah, all those rights.
Right,
That becomes the
exactly.
bottom line, and everybody loves that. It's right.
We've seen, yes, and that's a great point. We've seen just in our industry. We've seen in our industry like other manufacturers kind of go, Taylor's doing, we don't talk about it that much, and they've changed some of the way they've done things too. So it's really nice for us to see that. Okay, we're doing some of the things, Again, it's inherent. It's also because we're getting more yield out of a piece of wood. There's actually a margin for us, right? It's actually it works out to our benefit from a cost standpoint because we don't waste as much. We have to buy less wood. We use fewer trees. So there's actually a business application of that as well, which is kind of nice to have.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I think around sustainability, especially post-pandemic, it just sort of lends itself also to the supply chain issues that we're bringing up. We all had to kind of pivot in different ways, and we all also went way more digital. And Luke, I was going to direct to you, at Reef, what marketing tool, what things did you have to change up for post-pandemic? You guys change all your marketing tools and get back out to people. How are you getting content? Can't you? All of those.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, a lot of companies that were able that were a little bit more fluid with the chaos of the world at the time, obviously did well. And one of the things that Reef did, this wasn't my idea, so I thought it was, basically, we're a global company, so we have a lot of different products and advertisements and stuff that needs to be captured all over the world in like exotic locations. Surfing and sandals and the tropical and cool, but you couldn't travel. So what we did was we created a network of various creatives all across the globe that specialize in different things like photography, video, motion. And we would kind of send them out on these like little strike missions where they were like local to the community to capture content, and then they would kind of like accumulate it and then send it back to us. And basically it worked really well. And one of the cool things about it is when you tap into like local talent, you tap into these communities and you're working with people, you kind of have like more grassroots understanding of the culture where you're doing it. Like a lot more stuff to say. You can just knowing like little, not like secret spots, but even like this place, I didn't really know it existed. So, but having like just little niche understanding of various environments is awesome. There's something else I said about the. Okay. No, but is there another way I said that we adapted?
I think Reef does a really nice job of like feeling like the local company is a big conglomerate, and I think it's for the reason you just said. So your content's amazing, and it feels like they're like really in the community. They're really there. It's not just some big advertising agency, commercial that we're getting to see. I think it's really sublime.
For sure. Thanks for doing that.
Awesome. BJ, I'd love to hear from you as well about the topic of inspiration. Like, who do you think is doing it right? What are you looking at right now? What are some of the brands that you think you're seeing now?
Yeah. Well, I would love to give props to whoever came up with commerce at the speed of culture. Like, that's a dope ass
Great.
slogan, right? Whoever did that,
David.
that's awesome. Okay. Anyways, to be able to, I love Disney. I love Disney. I love what they're doing. I think even what they're doing with digital is fantastic. I also, and when I speak about that with Disney, because everyone knows Disney, we're coming out of this disruptor generation where everyone's trying to be a disruptor, like with your Netflix, with your Uber, with your, like that meme where it's just like the thing that does the thing without having the thing. You know what I'm saying? And they disrupted the thing, And I feel like with Disney, they kind of just like sit back and they know what their thing is. And their thing is like, we're gonna make you feel good. Like we're gonna be some happy people with what we put out in some shape or form. And so, seeing what they acquired and then seeing what their digital strategy has, where it's all at right now too, with like Netflix, like, come on, Netflix was hot during the pandemic, right? And we're already kind of like post-pandemic. And like, what is Netflix right now? Right? You guys don't go to Netflix first. Well, maybe if you have a daughter and you like to watch Coco. But if you had your choice, you're going like Amazon, you're checking out what's on HBO Max or Apple Plus and Disney, right? And Disney has some fire, like weekly subscription type stuff. And I'm sure that they're growing their subscribership. So I think that in that sense, but then also when I think about what they're creating, right? And what they're innovating and where they're going with diversity and how they're speaking that language now. I feel like they're starting to bring in like these young creators that don't even know they're creators yet, but they're just like, I need to go to that feeling. I need to create to that feeling. And so that's one, when I think about it, I'm like absolutely inspired. I got about like a lot of other brands, but we'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, it's definitely been changing. It's doing everything right. All my favorite content. Do you think there's an opportunity? I'm going to open this to all four of you. When you commented on the title, are there opportunities, or like where do you think commerce and culture cross paths with integrity? There's a lot of examples of it not working out well. In our call, we have like Victoria's Secret trying to respond to a scandal by putting women in bikinis and wheelchairs and then blasting that and having to pull it down. And like that. There's definitely a lot of pitfalls. So where do you see opportunities in either the brands you're working with, or in other areas where that can happen with integrity, and not take from the culture but bring something back to it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's hard for brands too. I think there's a lot of brands out there that kind of want to try to do the right thing, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, you feel it when it comes from the marketing department, rather than the brand itself. And I kind of think, this kind of starts to stretch into just company culture and brand cultures as well. And it really has to come from the top, I think, in a brand. Like, the owners don't feel it, the owners don't really act that way, then it's really hard for the marketing department or everybody else in the product division just to go, okay, well, we really stand for this thing, we should try and go and do this. It just feels disingenuous. And I think it's hard. I think there are a lot of brands out there that really want to try to do the right thing. I think their intention was probably good and kind of honest. They probably have a lot of things going on, but the way they went about it, and you see obviously brands fall down all the time doing that. And so I don't know, it's really, really hard. And I think that you can't really force that thing. You just have to have a company and a culture that kind of lives feeling like they've got to be around the community. You know, it's fortunate for, you know, again, it's easy for me to say because, you know, we have artists, you know, we're kind of our community's artists, so it's a little easier for us, you know. So but other brands that are just like broader than that, like a big consumer package, that's hard. You know, it's a really hard job, and it's a tough one. I don't even know, like if I was to go work for this, you know, consumer packaged goods company, I wouldn't even know where to start to try to climb that mountain. It's impossible. So that's a long way of me saying,
Listen. I think that is the first step. So my background is primarily in like street dance. So it's like working with like kids that have a dream that in an industry that is like the bottom of the totem pole of like the performing arts. And so they have to make their brand. And we're going through this generation right now in this era in dance where it's like dance can be the brand. Like the dancer or the dance thing could be the brand because of how they can not just can contribute to the conversation of what entertainment looks like and the way that everyone is receiving it now and their ability to receive it now. And so these brands like a Red Bull, like a Nike are just like, we want to play, right? And then these dancers are like, you know, we've been throwing our own events. We've been building our own communities. We've been doing our own crews. Like, you guys were never there, right? And so now you want to because this thing's going to be in the Olympics. You know, now you want to because, you know, they're getting views now, you know, and so now is like literally the dance. You know what I mean? But the brands that I've seen do it really, really well is they listen. That's the first step. They have teams that literally sit in a room, they get the right consultants, and they don't say, they're just asking questions, they sit back and they're just listening, right? And then they're developing their strategies, right? And so I feel like that, if anything, is the first step. And I feel like all of us can learn so much with regard to like inspiration. Where are we going next? If we are just genuinely like listening to one another, because you never know how your own perspective and your own peripheral of what you are already creating can play with someone else's thing. You know what I mean? And so I also want to give a shout out to this dude right here in the back. Like, you looking fly. Both of y'all. Like, I want to listen to that album. Whatever that is, like, I'm subscribing. So, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for me, for someone who owns a brand now and has run brands, the litmus test always, to me, in deciding this, when you're sitting there, you're the brand manager, how do you decide what is the right opportunity? Is it going to benefit the community that you're speaking to and that you're serving more than it's going to benefit the brand's bottom line? I think that's 100% what you have to look at. I think is this, if it's going to be opportunistic for the brand and you're just using the community to get there, then you're not going to have the result that you want. And I think when you do something that shows that it is for the community only, and you're using your platform as the brand to amplify them, then that is going to do so much more for perception of the brand than something that's going to make you dollars in the short term.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think for me, sometimes actually, let me preface this by saying this is my personal opinion, not brief, but I think sometimes it's okay to be simple in your execution. Like, you don't have to save the world in every aspect, in every aspect. Like, even the thought of just Taylor Guitars taking the time to be like, okay, we got extra wood. That's a problem. What's the way to solve it? Let's do the cutting wood. Like, that's admirable, right? And it's okay to be like, okay, this is a problem. We're gonna solve it. We're gonna make things better. You don't have to be like, we're gonna take these wood and build dog houses and save grace and all that. I think it's important to also just focus on creating a good company and having a good product that people care about, and then just being intentional and authentic. And I think that's another thing too, is being authentic to your brand. You don't have to necessarily we're sandal brand, so we're not gonna go to the break dancing show and be like, hey, like, we're trying to support you guys. It's like, we don't know, but you could have a conversation and laugh. Let's talk about it. So, but I think it's the same kind of, am I stretching out? I'm sorry. The sandals, but maybe that grabs the show. Genius. No, yeah. Okay. But over here, yeah, I think it's just like listening, you know, being intentional, you know, understanding like the goals of the brand, what your intentions are, and then just being authentic and just like, you know, you can innovate and whatever, but also it's okay to just like stay in and like, we do this really well, let's solve some problems and like make the world a better place. We don't have to like, you know, do extreme stuff. I mean, I don't know.
No, it's not great. Yeah, it's being intentional, it's listening and thoughtful and, you know. I have a question. This is something I've been talking about with my friends for a while, like in bars, et cetera, whatever. And 10 years ago, if you had asked me, did I think brick and mortar was going to survive? I would have been like, no, it's all e-commerce, all digital. We're never going to get, we're like, drop the store immediately. Let's get to the site where it needs to be and focus all of our attention, all of our time and money there. And then experiences happened. It's still happening, but you know, the word experience as a capital E experience was happening. And then there's like a resurgence again of having brick and mortars. And I would love to hear from you. This is something I'm just like, where are we going with that? Like, how much of it is part of your business there? You're really thinking about like those in-person experiences as much as you are your digital. Like, where is the, you know, how much are you putting one way or the other?
I will go. I will tell you that we sell guitars. So we sell guitars, we sell music shops. So 75% of our business, I would say, is brick and mortar. So and then you know, the 25% of that is our retail partner who does sell everything. Two partners actually, and they sell everything online. They sell our guitars online, which is actually pretty rare. Guitars are very, people would touch them. So when COVID happened, we were like, oh, this is like the worst, well, in so many ways, like the worst thing ever, because all retailers shut down and we just couldn't believe it. We were like, this is, you know, we gotta lock the doors, it's gonna be the end. And then it's interesting to see how retailers actually kind of got by. They would, you know, once they kind of opened the doors and have their customers come in one at a time and it really worked. The really compelling thing was that people really longed to be back in some sort of a community, and we're seeing it in full force now. The way our marketing has shifted, because we like shifted all our efforts to like more, you know, doing more online advertising because we couldn't be in stores. A lot of the efforts that we go to are actually in-store retail events. We got these things where you can come in and play guitars, and I can teach you about all of the cool stuff that that goes into a guitar. And people couldn't do that, and now our retailers now look at the doors back up, and they're like, we need you guys to get out here, and we need to have what we call Find Your Fit events. We need you to do that because people just love hearing from you, and the communities are back, and they're more excited than ever. So, you know, I agree with you. You know, prior to working at Taylor, I was in advertising. I would have been like, you're crazy if you're going to brick and mortar business 10 years ago. Yeah, me too. And now it's, you know, thank goodness, and it's really the sense of community. You know, that I think that brands kind of forget about, and I think if you're an online brand, it can be kind of hard to understand unless you know what Luke said. You know, and when you were talking about, it's like listening to your customers really, really well. But these give us a really great opportunity to listen to our customers. I think that I would like to put this on that point because I do think like listening to your customers and or your community, maybe is a better way to put that. Listening to your community is so much better than talking at them. And so it's been really nice to see our retail events like spin back up.
Wine, not really selling a lot of wine on e-commerce.
Not selling it a lot on e-commerce, which is funny. This was actually a huge pivot for us as a business. So when I launched Sipwell, it was in the height of the pandemic, and my very first business plan was this was going to be a totally 100% direct consumer business. I'm going to disrupt the line model. I want to ship it directly to everybody's door, forget distributors, forget retailers. You know, this is how we're going to build our business. And when we first launched, it was great because stores weren't open. People were drinking at home. They wanted their alcohol delivered to them. But as things started to open up, that fell a little bit. But also, I realized as I'm trying to build this brand, it's a lot reliant on storytelling, and a ton of it is reliant on trial. So people want to be able to try the product before they buy it, and you know, realizing that and coinciding with the opening up of in-person events and being able to do tastings and sell in store has been huge for us. And to be honest, we've flipped the model. We're now primarily focused on retail and in-store sales, and hoping, and what we're seeing is that the direct consumer and the digital is supplementing that. So people are finding the brand in store or at a friend's house or something, and they're trying it, and then they're going online to order. And especially, I mean, just the logistics of direct to consumer when you have a beverage brand, it's heavy to ship. It's alcohol. You need someone to sign for it. So there's a lot of hoops to get, barriers to even get it to your door. And I still love that experience and thought a lot about the digital experience and the unboxing experience and making it really fun for people. And I'm proud of that side of our business, but realizing now that we need retail to survive and grow, and it's a huge part of just being able to get in front of people and tell our story and get them to buy more. It's really good wine, by the way, and we're saying we're happy after you.
I would much more be inclined to try a cracker at Costco when someone is giving it to me than the most beautiful digital animal cracker that Costco pops up on my Instagram.
I think like psychologically too, I think humans just like community. I mean, we saw it during the pandemic, everyone's on lockdown, and like, this is like, and look at, I mean, some of us were probably forced to be here, I'm sorry, but look at all of us here, you know, people like, sometimes people like each other. So I think if you can, you know, kind of create a community, I think that's why we'll a lot of our business is done in retail surf shops. Like before Instagram stories, like people would come into the surf shop, congregate and be like, I love it this way, another guy, I love it this way. And you're just talking about it and you're kind of creating this little network of people. So I like it. I like
I think it's interesting to see the way retail has kind of changed over the past 2 years. I mean, the retail experience, and I'll say this for like guitar shops, but a lot of different shops has become like really a more kind of an intimate experience, and it's not just like these, I don't know, just the places where I like to shop. I feel like, man, this is like a much better experience than it was, you know, by the way. Yeah, it's very immersive. So designers, you know, I think that's a lot to be said for like beautiful design and really experiential design. So it's the places I like to go. Oh, restaurants, too, like bars and restaurants, and just like the design in there. And like, oh man, I don't want to leave these places. This place, I mean, yeah, this is like a little. I've been to this museum before. Well, I've been to the museum, but not prior to this remodel. I was like, this is amazing in here. So.
Yeah, I used to work on a gaming team at a different agency doing video game work. We did a lot of pop displays and retail displays, and it was all about, you know, symmetry and making sure the title was really clear. And then it was about, okay, now we're going to wrap this and do this, and now we're going to do this, and now we're going to put all of our money in E3. And you're going to go experience this game, and we're not doing pop displays, we're not doing any of that anymore. And you're like going to immerse into the game. And like that. I always feel like gaming's a little bit ahead of everybody else in the current policy.
The one other thing I would add too that I've noticed in terms of like the digital to brick and mortar, there's a shopping center that I live near, and the stores are changing over relatively frequently. And I've noticed Warby Parker is now there. Allbirds is now there.
Yeah,
Yeti is now there. All these places that built its digital brands are now investing in brick and mortar footprints for themselves because they're realizing that immersive experience is part of the brand.
Mr. Beast opening a hamburger store.
Yeah, Mr. Beast.
Sorry.
I have a question too. I mean, Mr. Beast or Well,
Well, I mean, I think a great example is if you look at NFTs, like, you know, the Food Fighter universe, the cats that did Born and Hungry in Long Beach with that pop-up, and you have your, I mean, that's a great example of like the metaverse versus like the human verse, right? And that thing murdered, at least like hypebeast internet, the Born and Hungry, like McDonald's pop-up type burger shop. And it was all based because they just used the IP of that NFT, you know, for the
Yeah.
48 Diablo. Yeah, so.
We're talking about that. So I want to touch on something you said earlier, Vijay, about social media and kind of its impact, because you know, in a dance community, it's really obvious, one for one, you know, if suddenly your video can get blasted all over and everybody's watching it, you get 5 million views, like brands show up and want to give you money. And TikTok kind of democratizing that even further, I think about heritage brands. You know, how do they continue to show up? And if 75% of your business is in retail, you know, like, how are you going to use these tools and still be authentic? You know, like, I know for the dance community, it's pretty obvious, but you know, you're representing the B-girl and all those other brands. How are you adapting to the speed that it's moving now? And then I kind of turn it around to hear, because I think the brands are all turning out.
Yeah, I mean, from a purely like practical standpoint, the way that we're looking at things now is YouTube is better than MTV. If we have the opportunity to go to MTV or to like YouTube, let's say for instance, we go to YouTube. It's free, it goes everywhere, and then just like be great, like what you were saying, be a great storyteller, create something like long form, and just chop that thing up and give it to every other vertical that you are willing to apply yourself to. But being able to have like that long form story that has like extreme strategy, intention, authenticity, integrity to your personal brand, and to have that message, and then figuring out like having all these other things where people can just be curious and hopefully find it, and if they don't find it and they're just digesting like the 2-second, like, you know, then let it be that. So that's what we're kind of like how we break it down in very simplistic standpoint. Yeah. So, yeah.
We see, you know, it's interesting because like as we changed, like social media, I think is I'll reflect on kind of what was said earlier too, is we do so much better with social media when we aren't the ones that are actually telling the stories. Like I think so many, you just get bombarded with so much brand messaging all the time. We have really found that we get way more mileage out of like us kind of going here's this thing, do whatever you artist, do what you want to do with this thing. We're not going to tell you what to do because we've made that mistake. And we have made a lot of mistakes trying to do that. We've tried to like Taylorize people. We're like, that just doesn't work. And so I think you have to, yeah, right. So we've fallen down doing that. We're like, hey, talk about this and say this, and it's like it just comes across as so it's terrible, right? But we're like, hey, here's this thing, go do your thing, let it happen, and we get so much more mileage out of it. And we're just kind of not in the spotlight, we're just in the back. Because I don't think people really want to hear from brands. I think it's interesting to see how like people have become brands and they have become distribution channels in the future. So that I think that's really kind of a fascinating turn that we've seen over the past 3 years or so, which is I think is going to continue. So I think that listening to your community, be a part of your community, but not get in the way of your community, I think is the point that's being made. I couldn't it's such a important.
Yeah, I love the sentence people don't want to hear from brands.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. Like I don't personally follow, like I don't, unless I'm really dedicated for some reason, I really need to get on a drop or something like that. And then there's things, so, but yeah, I hear something all day. We're almost out of time, but there's a nice group in here. I'm sure you have questions for these four, and I'm allow time for those questions. So if you have a question, we can.
I have a question for Legion.
I remember back in like, it was probably like 2013 or 2014, watching my first ever Kinja's video. I think it was like a performance at Vibe or Arena or one of those competitions. And that was like my experience as like a consumer of the Kinja's brand, but it was like tertiary. It was through these like local competitions. And immediately it was like, whoa, there's like some other vision here. Like it was like an aesthetic and this kind of like lucid humor that felt unique. And it was fascinating to see that turn into like a content machine. And you guys launched the dojo in East LA, and there's merch, and then the America's Best Dancer performance. Like, how much of that was kind of the goal from the beginning, and how much of it sort of just was added on as you kind of picked up steam and viewership?
That's a great question. I would say that, I mean, this is the part where it's just like culture, commerce at the speed of culture, or culture at the speed of commerce, right? And I think that if we have to kind of like rewind and we're talking about like now the lifeline, the sustainability factor of the dancer and this dance generation, I think they're just putting out like stuff that they love. Like if you talk to a dancer, or if you guys know, I'm sure everyone in this room knows a dancer. Like those people are like really passionate about like their craft and just life in general. They're probably like just a very bubbly, in some shape or form, like person in your little clique, right? And I feel like they just want to get that expression out. And those that have ideas of shifting into that brand, that has to be very intentional. That has to be supremely intentional. With the Kinjas, it was. They were a group in 2010. I joined them in 2015 when they wanted to like become a business, basically. Prior to that, I was working with a group called the Jaguars, and we were building a show in Las Vegas. And that was also a garage kind of group from San Diego. A lot of them met here in San Diego, and they were like training at Culture Shock where Liberty Station is, right? And they had the intention and the dream of doing, being a Las Vegas performer. And now they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary in Las Vegas, and so I think it's the journey of every artist. It's not just dancer. I think it's the journey of every artist. And it's like when you have that just clarity, when it clicks and you have that reality of like, okay, I need to understand entrepreneurship because that is a necessity for my sustainability to continue to do the thing that I have been love. You know what I mean? And I think that pushes commerce. I think that pushes like brands to think differently about the way that they're doing business, right? And so you could hear it, I'm extremely excited about the generation that, I'm talking like this is like building something out of the water. It's like, sit well. Yes. So thank you for that question. Thank you for calling. I don't know how you came up on that content, but sir.
Got a lot of dancer friends.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah. San Diego's a great place for it. This would be a fantastic place to have a dance circle.
Yeah. I'm gonna start this with, you may see Emily Ferris on camera. Heard of it? Like the part where she goes in Paris, she works for a marketing firm, but she's also an influencer, and she goes to this makeup something or other, and they put marketing campaign around her, she can't take it because they take influencers as makeup company and use them as a marketing campaign. And so I guess my question for you is, where does influencer and community meet?
I think for us, let me try to answer your question, because again, if you say that that is not right. I'm gonna dig a little deeper. But for us, it's finding, so you said, say it again, just so I can fully understand. How does an influencer,
And like community needs, so like you were talking about the employees, the local,
Right.
like, you know, and doing, like, they do their local thing, like, channels and
Yeah.
stuff, and, but then you also have like high profile influencers who get like a bunch of, you know.
sure. So a lot of the decision-making process lately has been trying to find people that are authentic to these branding. And there's like a really cool slogan we had, and I'm embarrassed, but it's like spirit of the beach, it's sustainable and something else. But basically, anybody who serves, there's like this weird thing with servers, I feel like they kind of smells like BS, right? And I think most people can in general. So my take on that is just making sure that you find someone. If you wanna get a quick like, oh, let's get a boost and get a bunch of followers and likes and all that stuff, do what you gotta do to get an influencer. But I feel like if you wanna make an authentic decision that's gonna have a longer lasting impact, you find somebody that aligns with your brand truly and work with them. Because we've had, we have guys that are on our team that, we don't even really have to try them. We're just like, hey, like, here's these samples. We want you guys to just document your trip and get some great footage. And because they are on brand to what we provide, the content always performs really well. It's great. So that might not be the case for all brands, and there might be different ways of approaching it. But for us, that's what's worked with us. My personal opinion. Does that answer your question, or is that like, no?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
You know, like influencers are like now, right?
Right.
But the community is like the future.
Right.
I've seen this not work. I have a great example, actually, that happened like a month ago. I was working with a brand, and we were doing hospitality for these dancers, and they're like competitors in a dance competition. And they invited these influencers to this very popular metropolitan city, and they gave the influencers essentially like upgraded like business class seats. And then all the dancers that they had traveled over there had like economy class seats. And then when the event was over and everyone kind of now knew who everybody else was, when the dancers were passing through the business class and they were seeing the influencers that were at their event that were watching them, that were just posting about them dancing, they felt a certain way, and they let this brand know, and they lost a ton of credit in that moment with this brand, and they have since course corrected, you know what I mean, and beyond an apology, and I don't think they'll ever do something like that again. But I think part of the lesson that I saw in that is that community absolutely has to co-sign on that influencer or that group of influencers.
Like using for exposure, the other one is pretty stuff because of it. Doesn't mean the community is.
I think, yeah, so I would say community first. Yeah.
Great question.
Anyone else?
Make a quick comment because we're talking about dancing, right? So I do have dancers as brand, and I love to dance whatever. So I just want to say, third in the community, I don't know, many of here probably already know, I'm actually in transportation as a designer, but we have this called the Charlie Dance San Diego, put together by San Diego Dance Theater. Is this 11th anniversary I started attending from the very beginning, because it's really hand to hand how to serve the community, how to look at the big picture. San Diego, as I said, there are a lot of pilots here in our region, but then in terms of San Diego, eight biggest city, still not a lot of people being here and know about San Diego as a city. So, and in terms of our culture, we have so much to offer. Mala Shop is one of the best dance company. Actually, they are the people who are almost so I just love the connection between how, like transportation is a backbone of any city making. and also go to the regional planning. I always have this idea because I'm in transportation, I'm a visual artist. So I have this idea, people travel for reasons. People just don't go to another mall or go to grocery shopping in different neighborhoods. People travel to different neighborhoods because there's something special to offer in terms of art and culture, music, or go to the market, surfing, or wine tasting in one country or another, right? So yeah, please check out Trolley Dance 2022. There's still tickets available. I will be there Sunday.
Charlie dance.
Called the
Trolley dance.
The right,
The trolley
And
dance.
this year, because of the coast, and we have the blue line take you to La Jolla, to UTC. So the venue of this year, Trolley Dance, will be in UTC. And I gave you a caveat because I constantly in, and I realized you can even have shuttle bus take you from UTC to the heart of the village of La Jolla. So go find out, check out, and I highly encourage you to take public transit as much as you want, because I think that the only active transportation, public transit, can make community feel community, not segregated society. So that's my skill.
Yes. Yes. This was amazing earrings.
If I ever spend time.
So I don't know, there might be a question in here somewhere, but you got my wheels turning when we're talking about, the internet versus like a brick and mortar store. And during the pandemic, I don't know, I got suckered into so many pretty ads for this product or that product, and disappointed when they came in. Or, it's not, what you're seeing on the internet looks all shiny. And I don't know, the resurgence towards a brick and mortar definitely as a function. And I don't think there's a question in there. Just a thought, of the
I
importance.
hear you,
of
girl. I hear you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point about marketing, though, is just like, the e-commerce feels very plasticine, it's all pretty and shiny, and you lack that experience to be able to see it for yourself. So you get it, you're like, thank God I can return this big Amazon. So, no, I hear you on that.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, some of you have to think about intention and authenticity, but I think you were also mentioning about brands that actually are being very transparent, but how us, the creative community can deal with brands that actually don't care, that actually don't have an intention, but is still trying to communicate authenticity, any personal experience or advice of how to.
Would you say work, you mean working for a company and you feel like there's not authenticity or
Or as
transparency?
you consume,
Okay.
how to push.
Just one client. Sure.
Get on Twitter.
That's hard when you're on the agency side. Is that what you're asking? Like if you're actually working for a client
Yeah.
We all have agency experience.
Yeah.
You want to do that one?
Yeah, I actually talk about this a lot. I think I've written multiple essays on this at conference, the right people having a seat at the table. So, there's a difference when they don't care, it's because it's a room full of people who don't care who are making all the decisions. So how do you get people sitting at that table that do care? And that goes into hiring practices. It goes into being vocal, say what you think, quit if it's the wrong fit. On the outside of that, where the money flows, the power goes, so don't give them your money. And I think there are ways, if you speak truth to power over and over and over again, eventually they do listen. But you have to have people in that room. So always fighting to get those people in the room. If you're rising up, take your people with you. Don't go on your own. And I think it works. I've seen it work. You can change entire organizations, starting out as a PA. So yes, I think it's possible.
You did not hear this from me, but I work for a couple of big advertising agencies, and one of them was very data driven. We had all shocking amount of consumer data, which is shocking amount of consumer data. We used to use that data. We used to use that data. Being a creative director, we use that data. Go, look, this is what your consumers really care. This is what your consumers really care about. And so we would try to use data to influence them in that sense. And I mean, Daniel's 100% right. You have people at the table for sure. And you don't have a lot of times in advertising design, you're sitting across from a client and that's not the person you want to be talking to. You just have to kind of use logic to kind of find your way there. So that's the
Well presented data.
But also with, I think another key takeaway of what you just said is it's very easy to get frustrated when you're at an organization or company and you feel like you're not being like listened to or valued, or you feel like your ideas are kind of being overlooked. And sometimes you need to be humble enough to like make a wrong. But a lot of times it's important to try to have solution-based thinking when you're saying. So you're like, this is what I think we should do, and here's why. So whether it's data or you read, there's some really good books on like persuasion, there's just reasoning. So a lot of thinking, and if you can just kind of help people to understand where you are instead of just, because it gets frustrating and you just want to shut down and go really internal. But yeah.
For those of you designers, advertising people that are earlier in your career, what you just said, it's probably taking nothing away from this, what you just said prevents you from having sleepless nights, because it's hard. Like when you're young and you're like, man, why don't these people like see the light way of the world? You just have to like, keep together. You have to use logic, and you have to like be the person kind of in control. You have to learn to present a great argument and be persuasive.
Okay.
Bring up the boring subject of cost. Talk about not sexy, but it flows through here into Hillary in particular. I think premium brands, or we're talking about brands that have a statement attached to them, usually come with a premium price or a pedigree price. And we're in a time now where a lot of market situations, I see Hillary say bouncing up and down, and I'm waiting for Craig's to start, that their prices are getting driven and squashed, yet you're still trying to capture something up here. And we're a really sensitive market, even though we like to be cool. I just bought a $9 croissant. Maybe it's worth it. I'm never going back. So my point is, you can take it as you want, but I just want to bring up this delta that when we're trying to find that upper ether pool, you put a lot of effort and cost into that, and we're in a dynamic right now where you guys are counting pennies to get a guitar to market or a Sipwell can of wine to market. It's a little, you're threading a needle. I'm not blaming you, but I can understand when you misstep and you disappoint, as she was saying, it's also a little come down. So, we're all in this together as consumers and marketers. It's just an aspect that I wanted to bring up because it's really unique right now with the confluence of effects on producing quality product.
Oh man, I'm trying to think how I can contribute to that. I was nodding because I definitely understand all of that, both as somebody who is a consumer myself of goods that I'd like to buy, and also of somebody who's trying to sell a premium product. The way that I think about it is, and our costs also are going up to even produce it because of, higher gas prices. So freight is higher and, supply chain issues. So materials are more expensive and things like that. And I'm not a numbers person, I'm a brand person and a marketing person. So that part has been difficult, but what I like to say, at least for us, first of all, is we are a premium product, but we want to be approachable. So our cans retail for, we suggest $6 a can, which sounds like a lot, but it's a glass and a half of wine. So if you compare that to getting a glass of wine in a restaurant, 3 of those would be the equivalent of a bottle. So it's an $18 bottle. So it's not a cheap wine bottle, but it's also not, expensive now with cap. So we're trying to bring quality to a virtual price point so that more people can experience it. And hopefully we're doing that successfully, but it's interesting to see the market dynamics and how that is shaping out to how consumers are making decisions about these things.
Our guitars come with like 100,000 songs built into them. somebody get them out.
Well, we are at time. We are gonna come back here. My great thank you to all the panelists. Really appreciate you all coming and sharing the conversation with us. We're gonna have more conversations with all of you later. I'm not out of here. And we will be back at 5:30 for another discussion, some breakout sessions with the training team, which should be super fun. So stick around if you can. There's some refreshments out in the lobby, some snacks, and then there's a party later. There's a party. There's seems to go on. There's food. We'll have a good time. And talk about it.
So Matt Bachman and I, we're going to be talking about the brand values. And so we've been doing a lot of talking today. You've been with us throughout the day with Erica's initial keynote speech, and then with the panel that we just had. There's been a lot of talk about brands, a lot of talk about how brands interact with their customers and with the community, and how they interact through different channels, whether it's brick and mortar or digital or whatever that might be. So we're going to actually open up the hood, and we're going to dig into what it is that actually creates brands, and how it is that brands come to really define themselves and the beliefs and the values that they hold. So we're going to start out by talking about brand values. And should I have a clicker? There it is. It's Andy. So I want to start out by asking, what's brand value? Let's break it down. What is a brand value? I'm going to open it up for discussion. We're going to have more of a discussion than really a lecture today. So, anybody, what are brand values?
The guiding message.
Nice. The guiding message. Good, good. What else? Other ideas?
It's what your brand stands for.
What your brand stands for. Excellent. Anyone else?
Some of the reasons you started your brand.
Oh, good, good. I'm going to circle back to that, actually. Some of the reasons you started your brand. Yeah.
That is the qualities that enable you to fulfill your mission, and how you get that done.
Ah, so good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. All good answers and all right. And the thing about brand values is that there is a very large spectrum of definition that you could apply to brand values. And there's a lot of very blurry divisions between brand values and a company's or a brand's purpose and its mission and its beliefs and its principles. And sometimes those lines can, the overlap is definitely there. At Traina, we define brand values in 3 ways. We try to break it down into 3 simple ways. First, essential and enduring tenets of the company. Second, guiding principles to steer all actions and decisions. Kind of heard a couple of comments that really align with that. And then finally, intrinsic qualities that require no external justification. That's my favorite. So when we're talking about brand values, really what we're talking about is the North Star of any brand. And it's great because that provides so much guidance. We've been building brands for 15 plus years, and brand values have been gaining significance and importance over that time, and perhaps more in the last 3 or 4 years than ever before. And for us as brand builders, those brand values have become invaluable, helping us to really lay the foundation for the companies and the clients that we work with. Those brand values really inform everything else that we do. Obviously, it starts with strategy, that's department, but it informs our creative. It informs what we're doing in our digital department. It informs our activation of the brand. So having that North Star, these brand values, are critical to enabling us to do the work that we do. Now, somebody said, why a brand or why a company starts in the first place, right? These are brand values. You know, the interesting thing is, so many companies start without even giving any thought to brand values. In fact, a lot of companies start out like thinking about brand, much less what their values are. And what I find interesting, and what I've found interesting over the course of my career, is that what we find is that that's okay. So you don't have to start a brand for a specific altruistic reason or based on any specific beliefs. A lot of people just want to start a business and they want to start a company, and that's great. And when it first starts, you can really manage the values of the company. Because it's so small, you're really able to kind of control the culture and the belief system and what's important, what you stand for as a company. But as that company starts to grow, and as there are more people and more perspectives, suddenly you start to see that culture start to fragment. And that's when panic sets in, and that's usually when a company calls us. It's just, we need some help. Everything was going so well, and now all of a sudden, we need to get something documented. We need guidance for our brand. And so that's where we come in. So essential enduring tendencies, it's essential. We believe that any brand that wants to be successful and that wants to survive long-term, brand values are essential. You can't live without them, especially consumer-facing brands. Guiding principles to steer all actions and decisions. Again, having brand values makes every other decision in your company so much easier to make. It just takes so much of the guesswork out of decision-making when you know what you stand for and you have clear beliefs. And then finally, intrinsic qualities. A lot of time brand values aren't something that you can explain to stockholders or analysts. They don't make any sense to them. We just had Craig from Taylor Guitars, and they're talking about just the great work that they do. And I'm sure that you can look at what they do and how they've opened up their milling facility in Cameroon, the work that they do with wood and sustainability, and you can look at that. There's a lot of expense that goes into that, but they don't care. Bob doesn't care that it doesn't make perhaps financial sense in every regard to do what he's doing, what his company is doing, the way he's doing it. Brand values don't require external justification. They are intrinsically valuable to the people in the organization, and specifically the people at the top of the organization. So now pass over to you.
So I bet if I asked you about your favorite brand, you probably could tell me what one of their values is, maybe more. But let's play a little quiz here. You call it America's favorite pastime. Whose values are they? And what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a set of values, and I'll give you two choices for brands. And through a show of hands, I want to hear which brand is it. And we'll go just a few rounds here. So round one. Whose values are they? Warrior spirit? Technical difficulty? Servant's heart? Fun-loving attitude? Wow, our customers. Who thinks that's American Airlines? Thinks that's Southwest? The answer is Southwest. Yeah. Right? So love them or hate them. Southwest pretty much wears their values on their sleeve. Let's try this again. Round two. Taking risks, constant learning, environmental consciousness. Is that Tesla or is it Nissan? Show of hands for Tesla. And for Nissan. All right. Minority. The answer is Tesla. Another brand that clearly embraces its values. Okay, final round. Build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, not bound by convention. Your options are Rico or Xerox. Rico is a competitor. Who says Rico? A few. Who says Xerox? It's neither. And you guys just, it was great. Your performance was perfect. And it underscores our point. Yeah, okay, so let's go here. Yes. Whose values are they? Anyone? Patagonia, that's right. So again, that just underscores my point that if you can live your values, so the takeaway here. So brand values that are identified and that are lived uniquely build brand value. And that's just not coming from the branding guy and strategy guy who uses this for every day. David, if you go to the next slide, the research has shown that brands that do have fixed values significantly outperform those that do not. So if you're like David and myself and our approach to building brands, you're a believer. You're a believer in what brands' values can do for a company. So we'd like to spend the next few minutes here just covering off on, okay, brands are important. How do we identify them? Or how do we refine them? Or how do I get them cascaded throughout the organization and not just on the about page, right? So we're going to go through kind of a simple structure on how to do that. But before we do, who here has ever worked on defining brand values for a company? Okay, a fair amount. Was that easier or more difficult than you thought? Shut it. Company, all right. What else? Hard. Why is that so hard? Because you gotta live. Okay, so we'll get into why it's hard in just a moment. But the structure we're going to go through here is really kind of a three-step, we'll call it process, but it's aim, craft, and activate. So aim, what's the goal? What are we aiming for when we say values? What does that mean? How do we actually create them? And then how do we live them? So David will take this first section here.
So let me just ask, is anyone in the process right now of going through a rebrand or branding? Okay. Excellent. We've got a couple of people in here who are going through this process. It can be maddening, we know. Okay, so we're going to start with aim. And the first thing we're going to ask is, what makes effective values? And as we work with companies, a lot of times what we deal with, what we encounter, are clients that come in and their initial instinct is to gravitate towards the most generic attributes or qualities that they can. Honesty, integrity, exceptional service, trustworthy. Let's go back and forth. There's one.
Respect.
Innovation, disruption.
Teamwork.
Authenticity. This is the game we should have planned.
Inclusiveness.
Wait a minute. Okay.
It usually is.
All right, so more relevance and less jargon, obviously. So brand values. So a lot of times what you'll hear, what we hear from thought leadership in this industry is that when it comes to brand values, honesty, integrity, these are table stakes. Right? If those aren't part of your business from the get-go, then you've got a deeper problem. That should just be inherent in the way you do business. Brand value should be something that are more relevant to you personally, to the people that you work with. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you get there. The other thing that makes effective brand values is that they are actionable and that they can actually guide behavior. So breaking it down here, do our values reflect the types of individuals we want to surround ourselves with? Think about that. Do your values, are they reflected in the people that you work with? We went through a rebrand of our own just recently, and we actually had a consultant who came in and worked with us because we understand the value of having an objective voice in the room to really evaluate what's happening. And one of the things that he asked us to do was to imagine that we were going to the moon. And we had to restart the business on the moon, but we could only take 2 people from the team with us. Maybe it was 3, was it 2 or 3? It was 3.
But we couldn't take ourselves.
Couldn't take yourself. So in the end, that was the challenge that he gave us, was who would you take with you? And it was amazing to see how our leadership team went through this process of all selecting which individual we would want to bring with us. And what that did for really clarifying the qualities that we want in the people that we work with. It was a great exercise to go through. And you'll see that that same approach then factors into HR, right? Can we hire, fire, review, and reward people based on these values? Does each provide a distinct blueprint for employee behavior? And if we were to start a new business tomorrow, would these be our values, even if it had nothing to do with the business that we're in today? So in other words, your brand don't necessarily have to tie directly to the business that you're in. Okay. And finally, they are finite and easily recalled. One of our favorite experiences in branding is when clients come to us, they've already done the brand strategy legwork and they just want to come to us for our creative expertise. And so inevitably we had a conversation, right? Share with us what your strategic foundation is, what are your core ideologies as a business. And then they share their 12 values with us. And immediately we know we have some work to do. There is definitely a problem with having a number of values that you just cannot digest and that you can't really recall easily. 3 to 5, that's the key number for brand values. When we did this, we started with a list of, I don't know, 25, 30 at least, right? And it's the same with our clients as well. It's just a matter of streamlining, finding where there is some overlap, and filtering down to those 3, 4, or 5 values that you really want to rally around as a company and as a brand.
So craft, how do you craft effective values? I know we're real short on time, getting signals in the back. So maybe, David, if you could fast forward just a little bit and we'll get a few things on the screen here. As David mentioned, one of the things we do is work with companies and brands, not just on their values, but on their overarching, what we call ideology. So we can get each of these individual elements defined tightly and synced and working together. It really provides one motivation or momentum for the brand, and second, just organizational focus. So that's what we're shooting for there when it comes to values, but also the ideology as a whole. And then from a tactical side, just a few tips and tricks. If you do find yourself in a position of, oh boy, we need to define or redefine our values. And again, David, I'll just have you fast forward to get all the text on screen. And I'll just call out a few things. One, companies tend to want to make it a democracy. Well, the employees should have input. The employees should decide our values. We don't disagree with that. It should weigh in and provide input, but try to keep your decision-making team small and keep it to the leadership team to make the final decisions, because they have the best view on the vision for the brand. So they are in the best position to determine what that final set of values will be for the company to help get it to reach its own vision. Then a couple of workshop tips. I think the meta point here is that you cannot define a brand's values over email or over Slack. It's going to take some work. There's a working session or two to be done here. And so if you can prompt your decision makers with some questions like David had mentioned earlier that the consultant did with us, you can spend your time not trying to do real-time brainstorming, but to really just have a good, healthy discussion with your stakeholders, and to work on culling down that list of, let's say, 25 when it came to Traina down to the 4 that we have today. And then using an outside moderator, and then again, identify your values first. Don't get bogged down in the actual language, but words do matter when it comes to values and how you elaborate upon those values so that they can effectively guide behavior. And then finally, activate. There's some key questions that you want to do. So you don't just define your values and go, okay, it goes in the brand book, or let's just put them on the about page, right? It's about living the values. So there's some key questions that we want our clients to ask once they've set in stone what those values are. It's what should we start doing now that we know what we're standing for in terms of values? What should we stop doing? This doesn't align with our values anymore. What should we continue to do? Identify answers to those questions, assign people responsibility for seeing that through. Get it done.
Can I share a quick story?
Sure.
Along the lines of what should we stop doing? So I won't name any names, but we recently had the good fortune of working with a company through an entire rebrand. This was a heritage brand, and they were coming from a very old school, very conservative place as a company. And we were trying to help them to move into a much more open, transparent, inclusive space and values and set of values. So one of the things, after we went through this exercise with them and identified their values, and I won't go through what those are, but definitely community was a big part of what they were trying to do, building community. And one of the things that they had enacted as a company was that everyone coming to the corporate office had to put a Band-Aid or some type of a wrap over any tattoo. The moment we heard it, it was just abhorrent to us. To their credit, once we went through this process, they recognized just how wrong it was as well, and how they were being so awful to so many employees. So those types of things, as you go through the brand values process, and you start to actually activate them, can have a transformative effect on the business and on the people that work there. That's just one example. Oh, and then we'll just quickly go through a couple of examples here. The funny thing is that, or I guess not funny, but the proof of the value of brand values is in just how much brands are sharing and celebrating their values. Pinterest, for example, great custom brands, Ben & Jerry's, same thing, and of course, Tom's. And these are companies that are giving away, in this case, a third of their profits. Again, doesn't make any financial sense. But from a brand perspective, who do you want to be as a company? What do you want to stand for? What's important to you? I had a conversation with somebody not long ago about Disney, and they were really struggling with the decisions that Disney sometimes makes very publicly. And they were coming again from a very conservative mindset. And I told them everything that they're doing, they are doing very intentionally. Don't think for a second that brand values are not part of the story, part of the strategy. These companies know that to build loyal fans and to recruit the best talent, that it's critical to have values and to live them authentically, really, in everything that you do. It all comes down to this. Lived values are invaluable. The key to organizational focus, internal culture, and connecting with customers.
Any questions before we turn over the stage to our next breakout?
When do you, kind of recommend companies, whether it is you've been doing, these are our values and having for so long, you keep them, you update them, when you kind of decide what to or recommend folks that start re-looking at the way that
Anytime a brand comes to us and says we're ready for a change, generally, we would look at values, we would look at ideology, we would look at all the different pieces that make up positioning and the messaging strategy of a company.
I would just add that it's never too soon. Definitely.
Do you have any tips or frameworks for taking a company's sort of generic values and making them?
Not that would, I can answer in a soundbite, but we have several exercises we would go through that would hopefully illuminate some of the things that they prioritize. Because the problem with the more generic is that a lot of times brands are afraid not to claim those things and for being called out for not claiming those things. And what we try to consult with our clients on is you can't prioritize everything, because if you do, then you're prioritizing nothing. So what are your highest priorities? So we would have a couple of exercises that would eventually give us hopefully to those highest priorities.
I would add to that, typically those generic brand values are safe. They're not really inflicting any pain. They're not really pushing the company into perhaps a less comfortable space where they have to act in a certain way. And if that's the case, then the brand values aren't really fulfilling their role.
Next question.
My question is, my background is in influencers. So when looking at brand value, does this only apply to large to companies versus the influencer person?
I'd say it's equally, if not more important, for a personal brand than it is for a company brand, especially in the influencer space.
I concur. I think it can be very dangerous if you actually are an influencer who is just completely disconnected from any authentic values. We've got people freaking out with that. Okay.
All right, so we're going to transition into our next breakout session. And I'm sure values will come up in some shape or form here. Erwin, Danielle, and Jared, if you want to come up here, and you're going to talk about.
Hey everybody. My name is Jared Haley. I'm the copywriter here at Traina. I'm going to be talking to my friends and colleagues here. Danielle Higgins, Erwin Hines.
Hi.
Are we sharing this? Hi. And I tell you, I may be moderating, I may be holding this mic, but this is a conversation about community. So I'm gonna do my bit pretty quickly because I know there are questions out there. At the end of that panel, I felt like we were already on this topic. So what I'm thinking my role here is we're just gonna give a preface really to the conversation. And I wanna start by context with you both, because you're both leaders at Traina, but I know that you do a lot in the community. Danielle, with the department space, with the boards you're on. Erwin, Future is Color, Jim. And that's where I think we need to get that out, and that's where we need to start. So who wants to start?
Yeah, so I'm the marketing director at Traina. I did not introduce myself earlier because I'm horrible at that. I run all of our external comms, events like this, new business conversations. I've been in the industry about 15 years. I also sit on the board for San Diego Design Week to try and help develop some of that content and get it in front of people who would normally see it or don't know it's here. Like how many times today I've heard, I've never been here. And that's great. So you're here. So now you know that it's a resource in the community. I'm really interested in community activism. I've ran a studio space for as long as I've been in the design industry. I was run a studio practice alongside my other work. Department, it's my baby. We're in our third year. It's on the east side, like 45th and on the boulevard, like down a ways. And it's a community space intended for creatives. So it's a photo studio, it's an event space, it's a creative place for people to come and work who don't want to sit in a coffee shop and have to buy something. I give the space away to people who don't have a venue they can normally go to, people getting started out, all that good stuff. And yeah, and it all informs itself. So all of the different ways kind of all work together. But that's the work I do in the community, is kind of really providing space. I don't know if anyone in here feels this way, but sometimes that's all you need is a space to go to actually do the work. There's so many limitations, especially, you know, we're all living on top of each other, everything's super expensive. So having those spaces really elevates everyone, and you have cross-pollination. So everyone meets, they work together. So many people have started things that met that department. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about community any day. I could talk about it for hours.
That's your.
All right, my name is Erwin Hines. I'm creative director at Traina, and I'm also founder of Future is Color. I have like a little write-up just because I didn't want to like forget what I was going to say about my brain, kind of sad, but it always shifts and changes because as an individual who has like this artistic practice, it's always evolving as I evolve. FIC was birthed out of my constant cultural research and study, with a particular focus on examining tension that exists within our prevailing social structures. Tensions that oftentimes limit human potential. So the goal of Future is Color is to help unlock that potential by providing accessible education and inspiration that subverts those oppressive structures. And I do it through t-shirts and whatever other sort of like accessible garments, but I particularly use t-shirts because of its accessibility. You can get it in cut and sew and all of these sort of high fashion moments, but that's oftentimes limiting to who can actually like consume it or touch it. And so that's one sort of realm of practice. And then I'm also co-founder of Open Gym, which is a restaurant group here in San Diego. We have locations in Liberty Station, White Rice, Weapon Ramen. We just opened our second sort of standalone White Rice location in Normal Heights. And then we also have some locations in National City as well. But the goal of that is to also provide space and utilize food to actually amplify the voices of the community.
So now you see why my two folks here are talking about community. Here's where we can blend the professional expertise and bring brands into the conversation with your expertise in building and being part of communities. So when those two worlds collide, what does that make possible? What happens? And how can there be a benefit or harm?
It's dangerous, man. I think where commerce and culture meet. They're not always mutually exclusive. Often, work that I'm doing or that we're doing, or I think a lot of people in this audience are doing, is to subvert common narratives, to change things. We don't like how they are, so we get into this because there's power in design and in brands and all of those things. And so I think for me, where it meets is where you can make change. So I don't like how something is, like I'm gonna find a solution. Communication is like a great solution. You can change hearts and minds in like 5 minutes. So for me, that's where they collide, is the power to change things. And I think there's, we could go on into some other places too, but for me, that's what it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's recognizing that power that we have as creators, right? No matter where you exist, if you exist in sort of influencer marketing and sort of managing those brands, if you exist as a designer, creative director, videographer, we're all controlling and putting something out into the world that is an artifact that reshapes people's perception of other people, right? And so very similar, so one of my main influences is actually like urban planning and architecture. With urban planning, there's urban identity. Urban identity is sort of the acknowledgement that the spaces built space and the spaces we exist in aren't just there. They're not just backdrops. They're actually influencing how we see ourselves within society and the value that we can attach to ourselves. So if you live in sort of a community that's not well taken care of or not well maintained by sort of the city officials, that can oftentimes weigh down on you. You might begin to think society doesn't care about me, people don't care about me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a similar way, we putting out content, putting out videos, putting out imagery into the world, again, are all artifacts that help reshape people's perception. And not only the perception of how they see themselves now, but can actually reshape how they can see themselves and envision themselves or imagine themselves in the future. And so to me, that's like the importance, not only important, that's actually the responsibility that we have as creators as we put stuff up, right? So even if you're working with a big brand that you feel is not allowing you to sort of express yourself and tell your own story, there are those mechanisms to begin to get them to realign with their own values, which again takes strategy, takes decks, takes presentations, takes tact and nuance. It might take a lot of time, but all of these big organizations like a Patagonia have mad money that they can actually re-input into communities. It's just learning how to get them to understand and see the value in doing so.
Or when you mentioned power, I'm starting to think about the power that community has, because it seems like nowadays brands really want to tap into communities. So when we talk about brands as a canvas, how can communities use their power in order to use that brand as a canvas for their objectives? And this is Danielle, if you have a perspective on that too, but the canvas part.
For this one, I'm going to think of an example, because I think that's the best way to go about it. I don't know if you know who Nicole McLaughlin is. She's an amazing artist who just made stuff around her apartment and her job into other stuff. So she'd take trash, detritus, whatever, turn it into other things, high fashion. And she just did it because she wanted to. It was beautiful work, creative work, but she always left the logos in, and she intentionally used brands to make a statement. So then the brands, she became viral, she's an influencer. The brands started to go to her. And Patagonia works with her, Nike works with her, Reebok works with her, Adidas works, literally, I think I tried to list it once. It goes on and on. She sits on boards to tell them what to do to be more sustainable, how to use their scraps. She's an advisor. She's put in place things that she's gotten from other companies at those companies. So she's using those brands as a canvas for her, sustainable goals and to just change the industry in general. So I think that's, the best kind of example I can think of.
Yeah, and I don't know if I could think about a better example, but I think as you've heard from all the rest of the panels, the rest of the conversations, authenticity is no longer just a buzzword that brands can lean into. Whether it's transparency in their sort of production pipeline, all of these things, they actually have to live those, and oftentimes they need external help to do so. So even something like that, they're inviting her to actually sit on those boards, to have those conversations, to be the actual ears to the ground, or even what Reef is doing, putting the content into the hands of, or the content creation into the hands of the actual community, the people that are actually there. All of those things are sort of mechanisms of turning a brand into a canvas for people. But again, like there's no time better than now to be a creator, because all of these brands recognize the importance of it.
That was my next question. Why now? Like what happened?
The democratization of media. So we put the media in our hands. I mean, if we were creators in 1985, this is an example, you would have had to make something that would have gone on television, and then the television would have been in the home, and then that could have gone to everybody. So like the first mover to me was when all of the media became within our control, and we had access to each other, and there wasn't a conduit that you had to go through to get the message out. We immediately changed everything, right? So the power shifts back into our court, and people, personal brands, right? So people are brands now. We talked about that a couple times today. So if you're an influencer in Europe, you are the brand. Then the brands want you instead of you wanting the brand. So I mean, those two things.
Yeah, and I was gonna just add on to that. Yes, the rise of influencers has changed how people, or what people expect from brands as a whole. The fact that influencers are people, they're individuals, so they actually express everything. They let you know who they are. They let you into their lives. They started by creating raw videos that didn't necessarily have all the polish, but that's what people become or came to expect from organizations, from brands, because influencers basically rose at the same level of respect as brands, right? And so the rise of the influencer, for better or worse, has transformed what we expect to see from brands, because we don't necessarily see a difference between this influencer and this brand, and they both sort of putting product in front of us.
Yeah. So kind of reminds me of that question that was at the tail end of the panel. Was it? Yes. What was that question again?
Something about like community versus influencers and like
Where the two meet?
yeah, where the two meet.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, oh gosh.
I think it was like properly addressed.
Yeah.
And that it needs to be community first, and your influencers need to come from within your community. Nike actually has an amazing program, especially like Nike LA. They reach out to people that are specifically within the community to be local influencers, right? And I think it's called like the Catalyst program. So to me, that is like the proper way to do it. The non-proper way to do it is Pepsi getting one of the gyms to sort of stop the vehicle protests. Like that's the not proper way to do it. And that's like what people do when they're using sort of these big name influencers just to sort of broadly try and connect with everybody, and it does not.
So that kind of leads me to my two wind-up questions. So everyone get ready with your questions here. But like, what would you say is the main takeaway first for brands who want to connect with community genuinely? What should they be doing?
What are their values? You know, and are they living them? Who's at the table? Who are you hiring? Who's inside the building, or not really a building anymore, I guess. And what's your vision? Do you have a vision, or are you just trying to make money? Because we can tell.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that the best brands are like platform brands, where they're actually becoming platforms for the voices of the people that support them the most. Again, Nike does a great job of this. They realized they were profiting on the Black community, sort of Black athletes, and they began to invest a lot more into those actual communities and begin to promote more than just athlete stories. They promote other stories to begin to tell a more diverse narrative of this community. And again, that goes into the whole, they're actually shaping perception, both internally and externally, of this community. So if you only show Black people becoming successful via athletes and athletics, then within that community, you can see that as your own way out. And from outside the community, you see that as like their own way out, or like that's what they're great at. And so by them actually getting to show this more diverse perspective, show artists, show owners of streetwear stores in LA, show a local sort of like Black-owned, woman-owned grocery store in LA. You begin to see that that community is so much more from within and without.
And the flip side of that question, what's the main takeaway you'd say for communities and members of communities who either seek the chance to work with the brand for their objectives or who are already doing? Any tips for them to get noticed or, to make, to give them more access to a brand's power and influence? Yeah, creators.
Oh, I think about it like, my anti-capitalistic side, like, why, I guess, why do you want to work with brand? So why'd you pick them? I hear designers always, there's some kind of holy grail of Nike. So like, if I could just get the Nike work. I was in Portland for 14 years and worked on Nike. It's not what you think it is. It's no different. I think often you have to know, like, are you being authentic to yourself? And if you are, then those brands are going to show up. And then also working with those larger brands, like, what is your expectation of them? Are you using them for your greater goal? What's your vision? And then they should just fit in. It should fit in. Or I would tell you to just start your own brand. Like often the advice is you listen to someone and there's nothing fits you. None of it's for you. So then start your own. And then then collaborate with people who inspire you, or you can do other things. It doesn't have to just be, I'll make it in my career if I can work with these people. It can also be, well, I can make my own thing and work with these people, which is, I think, more fun.
Yes. Yeah, I'll let me go first so I can say. So I guess what I've learned with Future is Color, I started it after the murder of George Floyd as a way to heal. And I began to create t-shirts because as a designer, I can't paint, or if I could paint, I probably would have painted. If I could sing or write poetry, I probably would have done those things. If I could dance, I would have danced. But I was able to lay out typography, copyright, and iconography. And so I created a t-shirt also because it was super cheap and accessible to everybody. With the first drop, we ended up selling, I think, over like 3,000 shirts. And then from there, that launched Future's Color as a sustainable sort of brand that I was able to sustain myself. But I just continued to release stuff that was based on the story that I wanted to tell and my ability to continue to heal through this process. And that's what I still do. Over time, PacSun reached out and allowed me to actually tell them what I wanted to do. And so they're not coming to me to help them advertise. They're coming to me to say, like, what do you want to do? We'll give you the space. And so like next year, I'm creating something called Moments of Healing. That's around mental health, particularly for the POC community, specifically men within the POC community in LA. Same thing with Nike LA. They reached out. I just got an email saying, like, we just want to work with you. No pretenses. It's just meeting with them, having conversations with them, letting something develop organically. And again, the same thing with Foot Locker. All of these things just came because I was putting things out that were expressing my story and my narrative. But it wasn't like a selfish story and a selfish narrative. It wasn't even to really make money. Like, I didn't think I was gonna make money when I made a shirt. Like, t-shirts were not the thing that I thought was gonna be my way out. I was like, open gym, restaurants, that's it. T-shirts were not it, especially coming from working on agency stuff with Nike and Google and all that stuff. You don't think a t-shirt is going to ultimately be your life. Ooh, this worked. But again, it was just following sort of my own journey of self-growth and self-examination that then created a unique space and opportunity for me within those organizations to actually have the power of collaborator to begin to tell them what I want to do and how I want to help my community. Because they're in dire need of authenticity, in dire need of our stories, they listen. And so that's what I was saying right now is like the that's an optimal time to be a creator and really stand in the power of your story. It might take long, it might take however long, but something can happen. And knowing that you will create those things even if they don't come to you. I think like what Danny was saying, I would still be doing Futures Color, throwing events, doing whatever, even if none of those brands reach out, right? So it's not chasing those things, it's allowing them to come to you.
Seems like the time to open it up, get some questions. One question, that's all we got time for. All right, 2 questions. You had your hand up first.
Yeah, so I feel like the focus on connecting brands with community, it seems like a lot of the time the conduit for that is social media. And you talked about like navigating power structures as well. Like, how are you thinking about like the power exerted by the companies that are creating these media and the influence that it has on that relationship between community and brand?
But I want to answer with the swear word, so I'm not actually saying anything. We're the dreamers of the dreams, right? We make the stuff. So if we don't, you know, like if Facebook is controlling our Instagram and the Instagram algorithm is totally flattening your business and, or, you know, it's just not an enjoyable practice or process for you, find another way. Like, we don't have to just get, we do. I think social media is like a necessary evil, but it's that, you know, I can personally reach out to somebody I will never have access to. And as long as that's part of the platforms, we'll continue to use them to our benefit. And there's ways to use them without, you know, I think subjugating ourselves. But we keep inventing new things. When it stops working, we're the ones that are going to make the new stuff. So let's make it. You know, make a new app.
How can you help a brand to speak like multiple languages in the community? I think that gave us a good example of like my community, you know, like how can you be a San Diego brand to speak to someone in Chula Vista or Barrio Logan and then someone in Siniras or Northern Heights? How can you like speak to them?
I think your brand has to have those people on your team, right? You know, or you get someone to do it for you. You can't, like, I don't speak Spanish. I'm not going to try and create content for that community. I'm going to fail. But I'm going to bring somebody in that does, and that does know those things, you know, and that goes across the board, not just in San Diego, here especially, like all the time. You know, like this event is a bi-national event. We're a unique city in that way, and encouraging this city to be more like that is, you know, work that I can do or that I can put my effort and work into, but you have to have those people on your team. That's just, it should be a bottom line, not a nice to have, you know.
We'll have plenty more time to build a community, talk community a little later, but we're going to get to the 3rd installment of our breakout sessions. We're going to bring up design and dev together. We're here, one hand for Erwin and Danielle. Mark Gallo, Andrew Walpole.
Well, we really compressed our time frame tonight. Andrew and I are going to give you a little tour through design systems. So we've had a lot of great conversation about community and inspiration and the impact of our brand values. This is none of that. This is very practical, but it does slightly relate to some of our community themes throughout, because as Andrew alluded to, we finally have design and dev sitting next to each other, understanding each other, and living in harmony. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think we only have about 10 minutes. Is that right, Kat? So you're going to learn how to implement and the importance of design systems in 10 minutes. So let's do it. Speed round. Hold on. I'm supposed to have the got it here somewhere. 8 minutes. Thank you. All right, is this gonna work or am I gonna, hey, look at that. So we're not going over our agenda. We're just gonna jump right into what is a design system. Well, this is Lou Delgado. Now, Lou's one of our design directors, and he could not be here today, but he has a lot of input here. He's our resident expert. So he might say a design system is a series of elements that can be leveraged to develop a set of products that are true to the brand. I might say something a little bit different. It defines everything that makes up a product: type, layouts, grids, colors, icons, components. You guys have heard these terms before if you're doing any digital products. But it also includes tone, style guides, documentation. It's really the next evolution of a style guide, next generation, and goes beyond the example into the functional.
And, I think that the thing that comes to mind when I think about it from a development perspective, our digital first world today is we're hitting publish every day, every hour, every minute. And design systems enable us to work at the pace that demands. And provide an operational tool that lets you do it without going crazy.
Okay, but seriously, what is it? Okay, so let's talk about what it isn't. It's definitely not brand guidelines. So we've seen these before if we work in the branding industry or any creative industry. We've seen brand guidelines, and they're basically those core elements, but they're really just gestural examples. Like, this is sort of what our brand looks like. This is what we should sound like. So I liken it to a menu. You go to a restaurant, you can read the menu, you can get the description, so you get an idea of what that meal is going to be, but you can't take that menu home and go make that meal. So that's really the difference. It's not a UI kit, that's part of the system, but that's a tool to help designers work more quickly, so it's not that.
And it's not just a component library, and a component library is a really interesting term where it's important from a design perspective to break things out into components, but to center yourself all around the idea of like, this is it, this is all we need. We'll just put these things anywhere and piece it together like a puzzle. It doesn't work that way.
Not anymore. So, okay, let's filing. What is it? Well, this is sort of our diagram. So it includes all the things we said it isn't. So it's got that design language. It has a UI kit, it has a component library, but it's really built on something we call design tokens, which are the building blocks of everything, but they are both visual and include code. They're design and dev working together. So the way that system works is it incorporates all of these things, and there's usually a sandbox or reference site or some sort of testing or proving ground for these things. And all of that combined is what you use to build all of these products. So your site, your app, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the tokens on the development side, they start from design, but then they follow through the process. And so on the development side, we get these tokens, and they enable us to build systems really quickly and really robustly. But then when that 11th hour change comes in, we can lean on those tokens, and they change, and our system is built to adapt to it.
Okay, quick little example. This is a component. So when we're talking about building digital products, we have these things. Imagine this is a little card. You've got your product image, you've got a title, you've got some text, and you've got a little button there. So that's great. What if we want to change it? So as we continue to develop these things, now we've got a slightly different text layout, slightly different buttons. So all of us who create these products, imagine this proliferates over a giant website. You've got hundreds of thousands of products, etc. So now you've got this giant stack of components, and we don't know which one's the right one, which one should be used, why should we use it, and what if we want to change them globally? Now we're in big trouble.
When these components are built into a design system, you're already enabling the conversation to happen with development and design together, so that those decisions become easy when something needs to change. You already have the tools in front of you that are going to make those changes come quickly and not mess everything up.
Okay, so why is it important today? I'll try to keep this quick. Basically, this is super important. It enables remote work with global teams. Obviously, that's a huge issue right now. So the big part of a design system thinking is that nobody owns it. So everyone has access to it. Everyone can learn from it and comment.
Yeah, it provides clear direction on design execution. And that really is because it's a single source of truth. It's a contract.
between the design team, the marketing team, development team. It's something that everybody can come gather around to, and know that it's not just going to get blown up and disrupted right away, because it's something that you're going to lean on for a long time.
So again, it's a thing that delivers more than a visual reference of what we're trying to accomplish, but actionable creative guidance. So it includes, motion and pattern guidelines, things like that, that designers use to figure out not only what things should look like, but how they should behave. Oh, sorry, this is me again. It provides a language for the team to speak fluently. So if you're a designer in the room, or you're a developer, or you're a product manager or a marketing person, everyone has access to this system, and they can understand how it's built, how it works, and have effective conversations about that together.
Yeah, and the last point is that it delivers precise components to build multiple products without creative. And this is huge, right? It used to be that creative ends up being the bottleneck, especially the bigger that your product gets. But now, if you're approaching things from a design system perspective, you're handing it off to my team development, where we can just take it and run with it. We can build prototypes, we can explore new ideas, you can hand it off to marketing, operations, all of these different teams where they have this really stable platform that they can work with. They don't always need to go back to the design team and ask for input. These things are solidified. There's a lot of thought put to them, and that enables everybody to use them.
Okay, so just generally, how's it different from like a template, you said? Well, that is a common question. Well, templates are an end state. They're a thing that people make. You probably all use them, and regardless of what you do in your job every day, if you're making any sort of communication, typically you have templates. So that's an end state. That's like the bulletproof container for content. So those things are actually designed to not change. And the other issue we alluded to earlier is they're not connected. So if I change something on template A, my letterhead, for example, if people still use that, that can't affect any change on any other template. So that's we just want to make sure we get the vocabulary clear, because those two things are definitely not related.
Yeah, I think the other point is templates are sort of like these big overarching packages, whereas the design system focuses you on being really granular about your design decisions. And so that allows you to adapt to a lot of new things really quickly. As changes come in, you get to zoom in to little parts and pieces, the little blocks, and you can switch those around without completely disrupting the whole piece.
Okay, so we'll just talk about some advantages here. I have to run through these quickly, but I think we've touched on some of these already. So we talked about creating a system where you really figure out the building blocks ahead of time. We standardize those, we communicate those. So these efficiency is a huge benefit of design system approach to anything you create. So that predefined base layer means we can create more things with less effort. Sort of the Lego block analogy again. If you imagine not trying to create a Lego sculpture without the actual Lego pieces, you have to create them from scratch. In this case, the analogy is we already have those blocks. We know what to do. We just have to put them together. I'll just touch on, we already touched on cooperation. You've got all of those different disciplines that are now more effectively working together in collaboration.
Yeah, and for me, it's clarity, right? I'm not the person designing these things. And so when all the design thought is put into the design system, then it comes to me. Number one, I've already been collaborating on it. And number two, it is so robust that I understand my path forward. And so that allows my team to move quicker. It allows all the teams that come around it to move quickly and efficiently.
So quick example, very quick example. We're working with a client that's a summer camp right now. It's a big summer camp, enormous. So they actually have several different brands under that umbrella. And so we're approaching their rebranding effort with a design system mentality. And the reason for that is, they need that easy consistency, because all of these brands have to be marketed, and they all have to be marketed from one central team that is not enormous. So just for practical, quick application, if by building a system that includes, type and button styles, etc., all of those building blocks, whether they're doing a website or social media posts or digital advertising banners. All of those things can be created, pulling assets and pulling those building blocks from the same location. So therefore, you've got the ability for a small team to be very, very effective and work very, very quickly. So, for example, they have their 3 brands, or 3 of the brands should be, they have their core summer camp, they have an adventure camp, and they have an adult camp, which I really hope I get to go to. But regardless, the reason I bring it up is now you take that one step further, and now we've got a system that can be flexed for 3 completely different brands and built on the same platform. So it's a really, really powerful tool that has even applications we haven't sorted out yet. Let's talk about some disadvantages, sort of.
Yeah, so time and cost, right? It's an upfront investment to build a design system. I think, the non-design system path has its speed to it, but that speed starts to break down, especially over the longevity of needing that what you design to live longer than a campaign or longer than your current rebrand. And so there's this time and cost up front, which you have to eat a bit, but for the most part, it's going to pay you back, right? This design system is going to be able to adapt as you need to change. And so you're never just throwing it all out and then starting from scratch again. If you're building a good design system and you're putting in the time and thought that it takes to do that, it's an investment, right? It's gonna compound and grow with you.
So in those advantages, all of the aspects we're talking about today, we're going to just boil them down into 2 things that we are most excited about. The first is flexibility. From a creative standpoint, what's exciting to me is just opening up that collaboration with everyone on the team. So one thing that we've experienced is now we can work much more closely together, which is, it's imperative for us to be able to do what we need to do in the timeframes that we have to do it. So working with multiple disciplines is just a key benefit that excites me about it.
Yeah, I think the thing for me to call out here too is just all the tooling that we're seeing around design systems. Figma, Adobe XD, Sketch, all of these programs and more to come, I'm sure, are built around this idea of building a design system and bring more than just designers into the app, right? It's really a collaboration tool, and it's promoting bridging those gaps that need to happen so that everybody can be aligned to your brand. From the values, you can get aligned by setting those, but then also you need to live your brand from the design perspective too. And if you can teach other people to do that are just outside of design, you're gonna all work together a lot better.
And lastly, impact. So what I mean by that from a creative standpoint is when all of those basic elements are defined early on, and I don't have to worry about how a headline animates or button styles, etc. I can devote my energies on those moments with the best impact, the greatest impact. So I can focus on creating that unique interactive element or whatever it may be to elevate the work without having to devote my time to the blocking and tackling of building typical assets. Well, I think we should end it there and take any questions that anyone might have in that what felt like 30-second description of this system. Yeah, I still have questions, so I don't imagine. Yes, here we go.
On this last point, totally in love with design systems, is great. And it does allow you to have the space to create, but I guess my question is at what point as a creator does it go from safety guardrails to like a barrier? Where you feel like I can't do something outside of this, and you feel like how can we truly be brand that has to hold a certain condition?
Well, I think that can happen, of course, with any visual identity that you're working with. You can see them, as barriers or guardrails. I think it really comes down to what are the things the brand is built on, and if you're butting that, you're hitting that barrier. I think it might be time to go back and say, okay, why am I hitting that barrier? What's the cause of it? Is it because we feel that as a brand we need to express something that hasn't been accounted for, in the system. And in that case, I think that's where something like this really works, because you can find that out very quickly. You can, as you start to expand what you're trying to do, you have the tools in place, the process in place to suss that out more quickly than maybe typically in the past, where if you can just deliver an identity kit and your agency or whoever created it watching and say, okay, go forth and good luck. You know, now you have to go all the way back to the start to make that adjustment. Where in this approach, it's really built to have to adapt.
I think I can even add on to that, you know, everybody wants to just keep making really cool stuff. And I think it enables it. I think having a solid design system, you know, allows you to, you know, we talked about it, it frees up your time to be more creative. And so you can keep adding on to it, or you can do that really specialized thing that you have a great idea for. And like Mark said, just not be bogged down by, I've got to build it from the ground up. And then the other piece too is activation, right? It's not just about making it look really cool and designing it, but activating your design system is, and seeing like, wow, I don't have to keep building something new. I can go do this here, and I can go do this here, and I can go do this here. And now it's the overall impact that is really creative.
Do you have a question back?
Yeah, just wanted to know, how do you think about design systems that require a company or organization to extend into real world assets, say fleet vehicle design, or physical products that have longer production timelines?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we actually were talking about that a lot. You know, in extending this, you typically think of these systems as only for digital products. So now we have to figure out, all right, how do we apply it to something like you said, like a vehicle? I think it's actually it does require a little bit more advanced planning and understanding of where your identity system is going to be applied. And I think for me, it's a mentality shift more than just a tool. So bringing in those end users that are downstream that maybe didn't have a seat at the table before, now have to, because you're basically setting up a set of guidelines for everything. So you can't be exclusionary in that sense. You have to really account for what are all the instances that we have to look at and adapt to. I think you just have to do that ahead of time, and then hopefully you've got enough flexibility and input built into the system where you can adapt should things prove not perfectly suited.
And I think, me being playing the outsider here, like, I think it's great. I think design systems are coming up from digital. And so we're learning a lot of things from that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to continue to extend out into those types of applications, because I find it as not so much a designer to come into a design system so much easier for me to wrap my head around what's going on. And I think it's the same thing again for like operational teams, marketing teams, like all these other teams can be brought in a really safe way, in a way that they don't have to understand a lot of the details, but they can start to apply their own insights too.
Yeah, I'll just give you one quick example that came to mind as you mentioned that. But we have a client that is, they're global, and they have local marketing teams in each region. And historically, the way we've worked is we would come up with product launch campaigns here in the States, and then roll those out to be regionalized. Well, as we all know, people around the world speak different languages, and I don't mean the language like literally. I mean it, visually, culturally. And so by starting them down the path of building a design system that accounts for all of the basic stuff, they can more effectively regionalize that messaging. So it is spoken in the language, again in quotes, of each local region. So to me, I think that's another benefit that isn't accounted for in our little deck here and maybe your typical description, but that's where I see the potential of that type of thing.
Kind of like McDonald's, they have, who goes over this, I promise. Like they have, McDonald's in San Diego is not the same as McDonald's in Japan, right? They serve different food. So it's kind of like that.
I think exactly right, but it's still based in
But
the
it's still
same,
McDonald's.
the brand values are the same. before, their approach to their communication style is the same, but they're given the freedom to express what is, most culturally relevant. Okay.
I think design systems are really important and, every client really needs them. I'm just wondering about like the future of specific design systems, because I've found that they're not always foolproof when the client starts using them. I'm thinking about starting to do not only, webinars with them, but like test runs to make sure that they know how to use them properly. And then I also am reviewing what they're doing, every few months. And I'm just interested to know if you have a process in place to do that, or, is that something that you think about doing?
Yeah, as we launch any of our partners that we work with, we try to sort of curate or custom build a way to help guide them past that launch. Now, admittedly, deploying a design system beyond just a web property or digital property is new to us. We haven't done it fully yet, but I think you're taking the right steps, which is how can I continue to be a partner to you over the next 6 months post-launch and the next year, et cetera, to help tackle those issues as they arise. Because you're right, nothing's perfect. Everything has to change. I mean, everything changes every couple of months anyway. So I think the important takeaway for me, at least at this stage of where we're at, is we're accounting for the inevitable adaptations that are going to have to take place. So there are systems in place that aren't just about execution, but they're about governance and guidance on how you tackle those issues as they arise.
And I think the scale of design systems, it forces you to change your process. Your process is no longer, I designed it, here's the link, right? It doesn't end there at all, because you're upfront saying we're going to invest in this, we're going to pay attention to it, we're not going to let it go stale. Those types of things. It means you're constantly collaborating across all these different functions. It means there's an amount of learning that needs to go on if you're going to really work deeply with it. And I think that it sort of justifies that. I think on the other end of the spectrum, right, the commercialization of design, where I'm pumping out new stuff real quick, right, because it's made with duct tape and bubble gum, but I can just keep doing it really quick over and over again. It's disposable. You don't get that. You don't have time to sit down and say, like, why is this way? It's a design systems you do, and so many more people around them can understand it.
Okay, well, if we don't have any further questions, then I'm getting the time sign. In fact, it appears we are going to wrap up our presentations for the evening. We still have our event happening in how many minutes? A few minutes, but we will have to exit this room, I think, to convert it. Is that right? Yes. Now we'll take over.